Most people don't die young because of one catastrophic moment. They die slowly, invisibly, from choices they didn't even know they were making. Not smoking, not accidents, not bad luck. It's what they don't do that kills them, the walk they didn't take, the checkup they skipped, the call they never returned, the fire in their joints they brushed off as just aging, the sense of purpose they lost but never tried to replace. And the most tragic part, it wasn't inevitable. It was preventable. Every single day, your body is giving you tiny clues, whispers, about how much time you really have left. The question is, are you listening? 1. Ignoring everyday movement. Believing only formal exercise matters causes people to become sedentary. Daily low-effort movement, walking, stretching, reaching, is vital for strength, balance, mood, circulation, and brain function. Story: Walter, a retired bus driver, reversed physical decline by simply getting up every 30 minutes and moving. It's not the dramatic heart attack or the sudden collapse that takes most people before the age of 85. It's the quiet, invisible drift that begins years earlier. A drift so subtle you barely notice it until one day you do, and you wonder where your energy went, why your mornings feel slower, your joints stiffer, your spark dimmer, and yet you dismiss it. Call it aging, natural, expected. But what if it isn't inevitable? What if most people don't die before 85 because they have to, but because no one ever taught them how to live differently? Not urgently, but intentionally. And this is where the real story begins, not with fear, but with curiosity. What if you could rewrite the last third of your life? What if your final decades weren't marked by slow decline, but by unexpected growth, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually? Because here's the truth few people want to say out loud. Most people don't die in their sleep at 90 surrounded by grandchildren after years of vibrant living. They die at 78 from compounded habits that dulled their minds, closed their hearts, and weakened their bodies, one silent compromise at a time. And this video is not about hacks or gimmicks or fear tactics. It's about uncovering the 5 daily patterns that quietly pull people toward an early end, and showing you how to reclaim control, not with perfection, but with awareness, because every single person watching this has 2 clocks ticking, one external, measured in years and birthdays and decades, and one internal, made of choices, routines, emotions, and beliefs. And that second clock? That's the one you can actually wind forward, slow down, or even reverse. But to do that, we have to begin with the most underestimated, most overlooked, and most transformative force for longevity that doesn't live in a pill bottle or gym bag. It lives in your movement. And not the kind you think, not formal workouts or fitness plans, but the little, constant choreography of daily life. Because long before your body breaks down in big ways, it breaks down in small ones when you stop reaching, bending, walking, stretching, and start outsourcing motion to machines, chairs, remotes, elevators, apps, and cars. And suddenly your life is designed for stillness. And that stillness, though comfortable, is deadly over time. And that's why we begin here, with movement. Because movement is not about exercise, it's about aliveness. And one man who unknowingly proved this was Walter, a 74-year-old retired bus driver who spent most days watching television, not because he was lazy, but because after decades of waking at 4 a.m. and hauling 1,000 lives through city traffic, he believed he'd earned his rest. But rest slowly turned into stagnation, and stagnation into soreness, then weight gain, then mental fog. And by the time his doctor gently suggested more activity, Walter could barely make it around the block without wincing. But then something shifted, not a grand resolution, just a nudge, a conversation, a decision to get up every 30 minutes and walk around the apartment for 2 minutes, just that. And he did it, once, twice, then again, and after a week, he added 2 stairs, then 10, then a lap outside, and within 6 months, Walter wasn't training for a marathon, but he no longer winced when tying his shoes, no longer groaned rising from a chair, and most importantly, he felt proud again, in command again, and that's the secret. When you move, you signal to your brain, your blood, your cells that you are still here, still trying, still worth adapting. 4. And when you stop moving, your body listens to that too, and begins to slowly shut things down, because evolution rewards effort, and nature assumes stillness means surrender. So if you've been still too long, not just in body, but in attitude, it's not too late. Because movement is a switch you can turn back on at any time. And you don't need a gym, a treadmill, or perfect knees to do it. Just a commitment to stop treating stillness like a destination and start treating motion like a daily ritual of resistance against decline. And it's never about intensity, it's about frequency. Because the smallest movements, repeated daily, become the strongest signal you can send to your future self that you are still in the fight. 2. Skipping preventive health checks. Many fatal illnesses like diabetes, hypertension, cancers show no early symptoms. Avoiding regular checkups allows these silent killers to progress unnoticed. Story: Evelyn, a 72-year-old woman, avoided diabetes complications by catching it early through a routine checkup. The second reason so many people die before 85 isn't because they didn't want to live, it's because they didn't know what was silently killing them. And that's the cruel trick of modern health. The most dangerous conditions don't make noise until it's too late. They whisper through elevated numbers, microscopic shifts, subtle imbalances that give no warning, no pain, no visible alarm. And the very fact that people feel fine becomes the reason they delay what could have saved them. Checkups, screenings, blood work, the small uncomfortable steps that feel unnecessary until suddenly they're urgent. And by then, the clock has gained ground you can't get back. And this is where we must unlearn something, that health is how you feel, because it's not. Health is how your body is functioning underneath how you feel. And just because you can walk, smile, eat, and sleep doesn't mean disease isn't growing in the shadows. And that's what happened to Evelyn, 72, a retired teacher with no history of illness, who skipped her annual physical for years because she felt great, ate relatively well, stayed active, and didn't want to sit in a waiting room just to be told she was doing fine. But what she didn't know was that diabetes was quietly developing inside her, and by the time she noticed a strange tingling in her toes, it had already begun damaging her nerves, and her blood sugar levels were 3 times the normal range. And the worst part? A simple checkup 3 years earlier could have caught it in time to prevent almost all of it. And this is not an isolated case, it's happening every day. To men and women who mistake silence for safety, who avoid the blood pressure cuff because it'll probably be fine, who don't get colonoscopies because that's just for sick people, who put off mammograms or cholesterol panels or prostate screenings until the damage is done. And then they face treatments that are harsher than the tests would have been. And it's not about fear-mongering. It's about understanding that feeling okay is not a diagnosis. And checkups aren't an annoyance, they are self-respect in action. They are time travel for your health, letting you see 5 years into your future and make changes now, before the price multiplies. And we need to stop thinking of prevention as optional and start treating it as non-negotiable, like brushing your teeth or buckling your seatbelt, because if you wait for symptoms, you've already lost time. And this isn't about obsessing over every test or fearing every result. It's about facing your health like an adult, like someone who knows that aging doesn't have to be a slow collapse into chaos, that knowledge is power, and power leads to protection. And yes, it's uncomfortable to go in for scans, for blood work, for probing questions, but it's far more uncomfortable to face a diagnosis that was entirely avoidable. And the people who live the longest, the fullest, are not the ones who never get sick. They're the ones who stay informed, who treat checkups like oil changes for a machine they love, not interruptions to be dreaded. And the truth is, the older you get, the more you need to replace pride with pragmatism. Because skipping your annual because you've always been healthy is like refusing a weather forecast because it looks fine outside and you deserve better than that. Your body deserves better than that, and there is no dignity in ignorance, only risk and the quiet bravery of facing your numbers, your screenings. Your reality is what turns 70 into 85, and 85 into 90, not by accident, but by intention. 3. Isolating yourself from others. Chronic loneliness increases risk of early death by 26 to 45%. Human connection improves emotional, cognitive, and physical health. Story: George, who reconnected through a community coffee group, regained vitality and improved well-being. The third and perhaps most underestimated reason people don't make it to 85 has nothing to do with organs or blood or fitness levels. It has everything to do with connection, or more precisely, the loss of it. Because we are not wired to live long without love, without conversation, without laughter echoing back to us from another person's chest. And yet far too many people, especially in their later years, slip quietly into isolation, not because they want to, but because life slowly rearranges itself that way. Friends move away, spouses pass, children get busy, social energy runs low, and before you realize it, you've gone 3 days without a real conversation, and no one has noticed, and you begin to wonder if you've become invisible. And the statistics don't lie. Chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by as much as 45%, comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, more dangerous than obesity, and not just because of the emotional toll, but because isolation literally rewires the brain, dulls the immune system, raises blood pressure, and accelerates cognitive decline. And the tragedy is that loneliness doesn't always look like sadness. It often looks like silence, a steady retreat, a calendar with too many blank squares. And this is what George, 79, discovered after his wife passed away and the calls slowed. The visit stopped, and he found himself eating breakfast in silence, lunch in silence, watching TV, not for entertainment, but to hear another voice. And at first, he convinced himself he was fine, just enjoying the quiet, but eventually the quiet became hollow. And one day, in a moment of spontaneous courage, he showed up at a local community center's coffee and cards event for seniors, not expecting anything, just needing to be in a room with other humans again. And something amazing happened, not overnight, but over time, as small conversations led to small laughs, as he learned someone else's name and someone remembered his. And suddenly, he didn't just look forward to Tuesday mornings, he needed them. And that need wasn't weakness, it was life, because the body may need water, but the soul needs recognition. And that's why people who live longest often have one thing in common: a community, a tribe, a reason to speak, to show up, to be missed when absent. And this isn't about becoming a social butterfly or forcing extroversion. It's about finding your few, the ones who notice when your voice hasn't been heard. And if you've been isolating, if your world has shrunk to four walls and a screen, please know this. It is not too late, not to reconnect, not to rebuild, not to be known again, even if it feels awkward or hard. Because isolation lies to you, tells you it's safer not to bother, not to reach out. But it's not, it's shrinking you, stealing days you could have had, memories you could have made. And longevity is not just about preserving your heart, it's about keeping it open. And connection is the medicine no doctor prescribes, but every long-living person learns to self-administer. And no, your circle doesn't have to be big, but it has to exist. Even if it's just one person, even if it starts with just showing up to one unfamiliar room with a cup of coffee and a sliver of hope. 4. Ignoring chronic inflammation. Inflammation causes joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, and long-term tissue damage. It's worsened by diet, stress, poor sleep, and lack of movement. Story: Nancy adopted an anti-inflammatory diet and light. Walk in to transform her energy and clarity. By the time someone reaches 70, 75, or 80, they often assume that any discomfort, whether it's fatigue, joint stiffness, memory fog, or digestive issues, is just a part of getting older. But what if it isn't? What if what feels like aging is actually inflammation quietly running the show beneath the surface, slowly wearing your body down cell by cell, organ by organ? And the scariest part is most people never even know it's there until something breaks. Because inflammation is the invisible match that lights the fuse on nearly every chronic disease. Heart disease, arthritis, Alzheimer's, diabetes, even cancer. And unlike pain or fever, chronic inflammation doesn't always scream it. Simmers. Disguises itself as moodiness, brain fog, swelling, or just that feeling of being off. And the longer it goes unchecked, the more damage it does. And here's what makes it so dangerous. The causes are incredibly common: refined sugar, processed seed oils, poor sleep, constant stress, sedentary habits, and emotional strain. And because they're normal, we normalize their effects. Until one day the body says enough, and suddenly it's not just inflammation, it's illness. And that's what happened to Nancy, 68, a retired florist who spent years battling fatigue, achy joints, and stubborn weight gain she blamed on menopause and getting older. Until a routine wellness blood panel showed markers of systemic inflammation off the charts. No infection, just a lifestyle slowly turning her own body against her. And rather than resign to medication alone, Nancy decided to stage a quiet revolution, not dramatic, but consistent, starting with cutting out processed snacks and soft drinks, adding anti-inflammatory foods like berries, greens, turmeric, and wild salmon, drinking more water, taking daily walks around her garden, and most importantly, setting boundaries around her stress. And within 2 months, her inflammation markers dropped by half, her sleep returned, her pain eased, her clarity sharpened, and perhaps most meaningfully, her mood lifted. And the person who had been buried under all that internal noise finally came back to the surface. Because inflammation doesn't just damage tissues, it dims your identity, dulls your spark, makes you feel like a foggy version of yourself. And so addressing it isn't about trendy diets or miracle pills. It's about giving your body chance to heal by removing what inflames and replacing it with what nourishes. And no, you don't need to become a nutritionist or go vegan or give up coffee. But you do need to look at your habits honestly and ask, am I feeding my healing or my harm? Because every bite, every night of sleep, Every breath of fresh air or minute of deep rest is a vote cast in the direction of life or decline. And inflammation is not a punishment, it's a signal. And those who live past 85 in good health often aren't the strongest, but the most responsive. The ones who listened early and adjusted often. And if your body has been quietly begging for relief, not just from pain, but from the hidden fire underneath it, it's never too late to put out the flame. 5. Living without purpose. Purpose gives structure, joy, and motivation, and improves physical health. Without it, people slide into emotional and physical decline, called existential frailty. Story: Robert, a widowed carpenter, found renewed life by mentoring his grandson and teaching others woodworking. We often talk about blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose, and body mass index when we speak of longevity. But the one measurement that rarely shows up in your medical file, yet may be the most powerful, is purpose. And you might roll your eyes at that word. Think of it as philosophical fluff. But it's not. It's biology, because the human body, even in its oldest form, thrives when it has a reason to keep going. When there's something or someone worth waking up for. And research supports this again and again. People with a strong sense of purpose live longer, recover faster, and suffer fewer health complications. Not because of magic, but because purpose fuels action, and action sustains vitality. And it doesn't matter what your purpose is: raising grandchildren, gardening heirloom tomatoes, mentoring at the library, writing poetry, walking the dog, fixing old radios. What matters is that you have one. Something that roots you in the day, anchors your choices, and reminds your nervous system we're still needed. And one man who illustrates this better than any study is Robert, 80, a widowed carpenter who spent a full year drifting after his wife passed, not just grieving but unmoored, untethered, and without her to care for. His days lost shape, his meals became simpler, sleep became fragmented, and he started believing what some people hinted at, that maybe the best years were behind him. But then his daughter asked if he could help her son, Jake, with a school project involving woodwork. And Robert hesitated but agreed. And what started as one afternoon turned into a weekly rhythm, where Jake would bring questions, and Robert would bring tools, and in the soft sawdust and gentle mentorship, something long dormant in Robert reignited not just memory, but meaning. Because he wasn't just teaching Jake how to build a birdhouse, he was teaching him how to pay attention, how to be patient, how to notice the grain and feel the weight of something well made. And as those weeks turned into months, Robert's appetite returned. His sleep deepened, his posture lifted, and most remarkably, his spirit revived. And that's the thing about purpose. It doesn't erase grief, pain, or age, but it gives all of them a container, a context, a story bigger than decline. And in a world that tries to tell older people they're no longer useful, purpose is how you remind the world and yourself that you still matter, that your presence still creates ripples. And if you feel like you've lost that, if you're just going through the motions, ask yourself, what small thing could I care about again? Who could benefit from what I've lived through? What has always made me feel alive, even a little? Because your purpose doesn't have to be big, it just has to be yours. And when it is, you'll find yourself breathing a little deeper, sitting up a little straighter, maybe even smiling to yourself when no one's watching. Not because life is suddenly perfect, but because for the first time in a long while, it's yours again. And so maybe it's not one giant reason that people don't make it to 85, but 5 small ones. Each one silent, each one gradual, each one so easy to ignore. You stop moving because it feels safer to sit. You skip checkups because everything seems fine. You stop connecting because the silence is easier than rejection. You let inflammation build because your body's complaints sound like whispers, not warnings, and you drift through days without purpose because you believe there's no one left to serve, no reason left to try and together. Those 5 things don't just shorten your life, they shrink it, make it narrower, dimmer, less yours. And that's the real tragedy, because the end didn't begin with a diagnosis, it began with quiet. Surrender, the kind that hides inside routine, that wears the mask of normal. And that's why awareness is everything, not panic, not perfection. Just awareness, because when you name the small things that steal your time, you can fight for the small things that give it back. And now you know what to look for, not the big red flags, but the daily signals: stiffness that says move, quiet that says reach out, fatigue that says rewire your plate, checkups that say face what you fear before it grows, and long pauses that beg for purpose to fill them again. And if you're thinking it's too late, if the years feel already spent, let me remind you, the people who lived the longest rarely had perfect pasts, but they made powerful pivots. And that's still available to you now, whether you're 58 or 84, whether you feel like you're coasting or clawing your way back. Because longevity isn't built in a lab or sold in a bottle. It's created one choice at a time: to move instead of sink, to connect instead of isolate, to ask instead of avoid, to calm the fire inside instead of feeding it, to rediscover meaning instead of sleepwalking through your days. And the best news: you don't need to do all 5 today, just begin with 1, because the moment you do, the countdown slows, the lights turn back on, and your life begins to stretch, not just in years, but in depth and clarity, in joy. And when you finally reach 85, because you will, it won't be with regret, but with quiet pride, knowing you didn't just survive these years. You reclaimed them.